We're very pleased to have in advance, couple weeks in advance of the Rogers Cup, but right in the middle of Grand Slam season. Milos Raonic joining us. Wimbledon finals from last year, quarterfinals this year. You've gone to the semis before and other majors. It's great to have you in. Thanks for doing this for us.
Thank you for having me.
We're the first of many stops, but we're happy we're the first this morning.
This is my prime time right now. I'm still on the jet lag from Europe, so
yeah. You don't feel like a morning Now we saw this picture of you laying on like a bed with McEnroe sitting there, and I thought, what a great, in London, and what a great caption contest that would be. What time of the day was that? Was that literally late night, and he's chatting with you?
That was actually in Paris, right after my third round match, I believe.
Okay, at the French.
And it was the studio where he films his segment for another broadcaster in Paris, and I just wanted to go in, take a photo. I was going to send it to him as a joke, and all of a sudden he just showed up.
That's where he did his Margaret Court thing, wasn't it? Which we all really enjoyed to some extent.
What was it like working with him? What's it like working with him as a coach?
It's fun because he's very intense. It's very impressive the way that not only he understands tennis, but how to communicate with people. But then he's also very blatant and honest, very much of a New York brashness to him. He'll tell you what he thinks without much filter. And to be honest, as top athletes, with definitely every one of us has an ego. Sometimes you need to hear it that way.
So what's been the most quote-unquote honest thing that he's told you?
Oh, he pretty much, I'll think I had a good day, and he'll go after me pretty much any time. And even now, if it's just a phone call to see how we're doing, he'll call back something that happened 2 weeks ago and be like, but we need to talk about this. And then I'm like, oh, okay, I just called to see how you're doing. But okay, I'm ready to take a lesson right now.
Now, was John a modern, we don't think of him as he's off Twitter. There are parody accounts of John that are quite humorous on Twitter. He's well aware of them. He says he's going to hunt those people down and get them eventually. Is he a texter? Is he or is he old school? I'm going to call and we're going to have a conversation.
It's mostly a call. I think we introduced him when he joined us last year to WhatsApp.
How'd that go?
It went well because he participated in that. We tried to introduce him to Uber. It went as far as a download, but no account creation.
No cars showed up?
No commerce?
No.
So now, as far as it's refreshing that it's phone calls, because I think those are probably more effective, specifically when you're discussing technique. And I imagine texting it probably wouldn't, emojis on working on certain parts of your game might not cut it. As far as appearing at Wimbledon, and you've been there a bunch of times, describe that experience, maybe your first time there compared to your last time there, strictly from a nerve standpoint, the experience, what it's like to play there, the pressure.
Well, I think the biggest difference is you know what to expect. The first time around, you're sort of lost, and you're sort of just adjusting as you go. You go into the locker room, you find your locker, you see where you are, you get a vibe of the guys around you. Also, I was quite young on tour and new to the tour at that point, whereas now it's been the same locker, I think, the last 4 years. I know who's going to be beside me. I don't, you just go about the things. And I don't think I was any more stressed this year because of last year's result. I think it felt, which was a little bit weird, just felt like another Wimbledon. It just started anew. Last year didn't matter. It was irrelevant. Tennis passes by so quick. People forget Wimbledon very quickly. We'll get to these tournaments here in Montreal, Cincinnati following, the U.S. Open, and, win or lose, people forget pretty quickly and move on.
Milos Raonic joining us in studio. Rogers Cup 2 weeks from today in Montreal for the men. The women are here in Toronto. You can go to rogerscup.com, find out more. You make the final and beat Roger in an amazing match last year, lose to Andy Murray in the final. When you lost the quarterfinal this year to Roger at the All England Club, I'm sure great disappointment, and then you watch him plow through the semifinals and the finals, and you go, okay, it's probably the greatest player ever, and there was this great sense of inevitability. He skipped all the clay court season, so you guys are hustling it off and on planes, in and out of tournaments. He's only focused on the one thing, which is Wimbledon. He was awfully well rested mentally and physically to take all the rest of you guys on.
Yeah, he was, and he's in that position where he understands himself. He's probably amongst with the other two greatest players of all time there between Novak and Rafa. He's the guys that understand what works for him best. And obviously there was a lot of concern, but Roger's been on tour, I believe it's 17 years now, 6 months off at the end of last year. He was one of the guys that was never injured. So he was actually playing week in and week out. And you just go into playing and you go into focusing more on recovery. And I'm sure for those 6 months, he actually could focus on what he wanted to do with his game. And his game hasn't changed so much, but the thing that I was most impressed with or taken away with was how sharp he was in each and every one of the moments. When he needed it, he stepped up. You could see there was no mental fatigue. Obviously, he's riding a high on confidence. He knew what he needed to do, and he was executing.
What do you need to do in your mind?
I think for me, and fortunately, I have been able to do it over the last few weeks, has been staying healthy. Every time I've put in a lot of work, I've been able to get a few weeks out of myself, and then I take 2 steps back. And then it takes a lot more energy to get back to where I was. But then I'm sort of running myself down just because of the stresses of it. But then also I'm overtraining myself to get back there quickly because we have penalties if we're missing certain tournaments on tour. And then it just becomes a downward cycle. So staying healthy, and then obviously the constant improvement. I need to be better physically. I need to move better. But for me, to be honest with you, the most important thing is I have the game with me. I got to get those wins out of me. It's more about how I show up mentally, psychologically to those important matches. I wasn't there the first 2 sets against Roger. I was there. I had a lot of opportunities in that third, but you're fighting a big uphill battle against a guy who's very confident and obviously one of the greatest players of all time, especially when he's ahead.
Sports is tricky, right? Like, you love other sports. You're a big fan of the Raptors. You watch team sports. And when you see somebody or a team do something once, you're like, well, they'll do it again. I tell you this, you're the greatest player this country has ever had on the men's side. When we were all kids, we dreamed about having a player play in a Wimbledon final or win tournaments on a regular basis. But you ask more of yourself than just that. That's kind of tough to get inside your own head and think about what I said, and yet you have your own expectations for your goals. You have to.
Yeah, it's not by any means enough, anything I've achieved to this point. I think if my career was stopped today, I would be quite disappointed. There's a lot more I want to do. And it's hard if there isn't a lot more you want to do, to go out every day, to go to bed early every night, miss out on a lot of things. What people might see as sacrifices, but for me, it just feels like a part of the process. But it's a process because there is that goal. There's where I want to be. It's a very clear image of what I want to achieve, and then everything else just seems easy. Those hard days in the gym, on court, in the heat, in the cold, whatever it may be, is just a part of what I need to do. And if I'm not doing it, I'm not giving myself the best opportunity to win.
Which of the slams would be most special to you to win?
Wimbledon, because it just feels very different. But for me, Wimbledon, even though I haven't played great in the U.S. Open, is also another big one, just because it's so close to home, and it's a great feeling there, and it's a little bit more rowdy, like North American sports that I've grown around, and I like that vibe a bit more.
I would think that, yeah. The night matches, we've seen you play some epic night matches. You did lose to Andy Murray the year he broke through and won, and he didn't look like he was going to lose to anybody at that point. When you look at, we were talking off air, and I mentioned, Murray ended Wimbledon on what looked like a bit of an injury, didn't look at 100%. Novak obviously isn't. You're never grateful that other players aren't healthy because you've had to live through that before, and other players lesser players are like, oh, good, other injured players, that helps me. But do you see a more open field for the U.S. maybe than you might have even a month ago, as well as Rogers playing? And I'd say going into Melbourne even next year, guys like you in your mid-20s, Milos, you're hoping to outlast these guys who are now in their 30s, right? You have to.
Yeah, you try to put yourself in the best position. You never really know when it's going to come together for you. A lot of things can happen. For example, you look at the top half of Wimbledon this year. Nobody was really considering Marin Cilic there. He stayed there. He took advantage of the opportunities that presented themselves. So it's not like you can necessarily always plan and be like, I'm going to be at my best this week and it's just going to work out for me. You sort of have to be there every week, and you have to try to find those openings, because in tennis, you don't have to be the best player every single day. You just got to be better than the guy on the other side of the net, and you try to take advantage of that process.
As far as perks and non-perks of what you do, what's the best thing about it? What's the worst thing about it?
Best thing about it, get to see a lot of different aspects of the world, culturally, and also the greatest experiences. And for me, just the child in me that's always wanted to be there. I think that's one of the most satisfying things. Hardest thing, the travel and going to the same places the same week of every year. Honestly, I wouldn't mind going to all these places. It's great, but let's switch up the weeks a little bit. There's different things going on different weeks, which could make it a bit more fun.
Now, you watched a little golf yesterday, and before you came on, we talked a little bit about golf. And you played golf 3 times in your life, and one of them was with a legend. Tell us about that.
Yeah, Jack Nicklaus. I was very fortunate. He was having a fundraiser for his the Jack Foundation in his home in Palm Beach, and he has actually some of the greatest grass tennis courts at his house. He has 2 of them. And since I guess he makes golf courses, he's a specialist on grass. And so I went there, I played with him and his friends. It was a fun time. And then he took me to a driving range, gave me a few pointers. I was quite nervous. He told me I was pretty good for only playing 3 times. But that went downhill pretty fast because I came back here a couple days later. I went to the driving range to hit a few balls, and I was like, I'm not feeling this.
You're built for more tennis. I mean, there's not too many great golfers that are 6'5" and a bit, are there? I mean, there are.
Yeah, it's hard to find clubs. You got to get them in.
There is that. We know you got to run in a little bit. Tell folks why in Montreal or Toronto. The Rogers Cup's got great tradition. Canadian Open. It was the Du Maurier. It's a tournament we all wanted to go to as kids and have our parents take us to. And it must make you very pleased in Toronto or Montreal when you see parents and they got 6-year-olds, 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds all growing to love the game, and you're the player they watch.
Yeah, it's for me definitely up there as one of the most exciting weeks of the year, the ones I look forward to the most. And there's so many different parts about it. You have the weekend, which I believe access is free. When you can see the top players.
It is practice. Now. You've said it is, so now it is.
Yeah, now they got to follow through on that one.
So wait till he gets the bill.
Yes,
they're paying for it.
It's an invoice. Yes.
So you have Mr. Raonic. Here's the invoice.
Well, deduct it, please, if it can fit within that prize money.
It might, yeah.
And then you have obviously the tournament when you have the best players competing. And I think there's so many great storylines this year. You have guys that are trying to get back on their horse. You have guys that were not around last year that are trying to make something significant happen. So it's really a special time. The energy in both tournaments is fantastic and also a lot of fun. And it's not, if there's more than one match really other than the finals day that you can go out and enjoy. And that's a lot of tennis you can watch if you enjoy it that much and you want to be there all day.
It's a ton. We first started seeing you with that. They should keep having that San Jose tournament. Would you win that 3 years in a row?
3 years in a row.
And then they stopped having it. They were like, you were too good. We got to cancel the tournament.
Or I just can't sell tickets.
And they gave you a Sharks jersey. That must be way back in the closet somewhere.
It's somewhere, but it's only stayed in the closet because it has some sort of good memory to it with that tournament.
And now you got Patrick Marleau playing for your hometown team in Toronto. So there's that to consider.
You have to change the number.
You just have to change the number. We loved having you in. We know you got to run. We're not kicking you out. You got to go elsewhere and meet and greet fans. And that I know it's a long day for you, but we loved having you in to do this today with us.
Thank you, guys.